The cold metal walls of the International Lunar Research Station hummed with quiet anticipation. HFY Park stood near the observation window, his breath creating a small fog against the reinforced glass. Outside, the lunar landscape stretched, endless and grey, a stark canvas of silence and stillness. Yuna Kim watched him from across the research lab, her alien features subtly different from human appearance. Her skin had a faint, translucent quality, with soft blue undertones that seemed to pulse with an inner light. She had been observing humans for months, but HFY was different. He moved with a calm precision that caught her attention. His hands, strong but gentle, manipulated complex holographic interfaces with an intuitive grace. Unlike other researchers, who seemed mechanical and detached, HFY carried an emotional depth that intrigued her. The station's communication system suddenly crackled. An unexpected solar flare was approaching, potentially disrupting their research and communication networks. Most team members would panic, but HFY remained remarkably composed. "We need to secure the sensitive equipment," he said softly, his voice steady and clear. Yuna noticed something peculiar. As he spoke, a subtle energy seemed to flow around him, not electromagnetic, but something more complex. She had studied human psychology extensively, but this was different. Her species had advanced telepathic abilities, capable of reading emotional signatures and mental states. With most beings, these connections were surface-level and fragmented. But with HFY, something unusual happened. When she cautiously extended her mental probe, expecting resistance or a jumbled emotional landscape, she encountered something unexpected. Instead of chaos, there was a structured, yet incredibly fluid mental environment. His thoughts didn't push back or hide, they seemed to adapt. HFY turned, meeting her gaze directly. For a moment, time seemed to pause. "Are you analyzing me?" he asked, not with accusation, but with genuine curiosity. Yuna was momentarily stunned. Typically, beings would feel violated or threatened by a telepathic scan. But HFY appeared, calm, almost welcoming. "Your mental structure is unique," she responded, surprised at her own directness. He smiled. Not a programmed response, but a genuine expression of understanding. The solar flare warning continued to blare in the background, but they remained focused on each other. The research station's artificial gravity systems began to fluctuate. Equipment started to shake. Most humans would be rushing to secure systems, but HFY moved with calculated efficiency. Each action was purposeful, each movement precise. Yuna realized she was witnessing something extraordinary. Humans were often described as emotional, unpredictable. But HFY demonstrated a perfect balance between emotional intelligence and logical reasoning. As he worked securing delicate research equipment, he occasionally glanced at her, not with suspicion or fear, but with an open, almost collaborative energy. It was as if he understood something fundamental about connection that transcended species. The solar flare intensified. Communication systems began to fail. But within their small laboratory, HFY and Yuna remained a pocket of calm. "We'll get through this," he said simply, not as a statement of bravado, but as a genuine expression of confidence. Yuna found herself believing him, not because of any logical argument, but because of the genuine certainty that radiated from him. When the solar interference finally subsided, something had changed. The initial research parameters, studying human emotional responses, now seemed inadequate. They had encountered something more profound, a potential for understanding that went beyond traditional scientific boundaries. HFY returned to his work, seemingly unaware of the momentous shift that had just occurred. But Yuna knew. Something remarkable had just begun. The lunar landscape outside remained unchanged, grey, silent, indifferent. But inside the research station, a new chapter of interspecies communication was about to unfold. The research facility buzzed with quiet energy. Yuna had been studying HFY's neural patterns for weeks, and each day revealed something more surprising than the last. Her advanced scanning equipment showed patterns that defied everything she knew about cognitive communication. Most species had rigid mental structures. Humans were supposed to be chaotic, unpredictable. But Jiehui's mind was like a living network, flexible, adaptive, constantly reorganizing itself. When Yuna attempted initial telepathic connections, something unexpected happened. Instead of resisting, his mind seemed to create small bridges. Neural pathways would shift, creating temporary connection points that allowed limited but meaningful communication. It was like watching a living system learn and adapt in real time. "Can you hear my thoughts?" Yuna asked during one experimental session. Jiehui closed his eyes, concentrating. "Not words exactly," he responded, "but feelings, impressions." Their research team watched in amazement. Previous attempts with other human subjects had failed completely. Mental barriers would slam shut, or subjects would experience significant psychological stress. But Jiehui remained calm, almost curious. The facility's lead scientist, Dr. Park Min-seo, reviewed the data with growing excitement. "This is unprecedented," she muttered, studying the complex brain scans. Yuna discovered that Jiehui could not just receive telepathic signals, but could subtly influence them. His emotional intelligence acted like a translator, converting complex alien thought patterns into understandable experiences. During one remarkable session, Yuna shared a memory from her home planet, a complex emotional landscape of multiple sensory experiences. Normally, such a transmission would be incomprehensible to other species, but Jiehui processed it differently. He described her memory not in words, but in a rich, nuanced emotional language. The cold research environment seemed to warm with the intensity of shared understanding. "It's like watching two different musical instruments learn to play together," Dr. Park observed, her excitement barely contained. The implications were staggering. If humans could develop this level of mental communication, it would revolutionize interspecies diplomacy. No more misunderstandings, no more complex translation algorithms. Pure, direct, emotional understanding. Jiehui's background made him even more interesting. A former military communications specialist who had studied psychology and neurological systems, he approached the experiments with a unique blend of scientific rigor and emotional openness. "Communication is more than language," he often said. "It's about understanding." Yuna realized he was right. Traditional communication methods were limited. Words could lie, but emotional signatures rarely did. And Jiehui had an extraordinary ability to read these signatures. During another experiment, she projected a complex emotional scenario, a memory of loss, of separation, of profound grief from her species' history. Most beings would find such a transmission overwhelming. Jiehui not only received the transmission, but responded with a depth of empathy that surprised everyone. He didn't just understand the emotion, he could trace its intricate pathways, its subtle variations. "Your pain," he said softly, "is not just about loss, it's about transformation." The research team watched in stunned silence. What was happening was more than a scientific experiment. It was a breakthrough in understanding consciousness itself. Dr. Park's notes became increasingly excited. "Subject demonstrates unprecedented neural plasticity, emotional translation capabilities beyond current scientific understanding." Weeks turned into months. Each session revealed new layers of potential. Jiehui wasn't just a test subject, he was becoming a bridge between species, between ways of thinking and feeling. Yuna began to understand something profound. Humans weren't just another species to be studied. They were potential partners in a much larger cosmic conversation. As another experimental session concluded, Jiehui smiled. Not a programmed response, but a genuine expression of shared discovery. "We're just getting started," he said, looking at Yuna, and in that moment, both of them knew something extraordinary was unfolding, a new language of understanding that transcended traditional communication. The research continued, each day bringing new surprises, new possibilities. The Global Science Conference Hall was packed with researchers from 20 different planetary systems. Representatives from various civilizations sat in tense anticipation, their technological translators humming with uncertainty. HFY and Yuna stood at the center of the stage, looking unexpectedly calm. Behind them, complex holographic displays showed intricate neural connection maps that nobody had ever seen before. "We've discovered something remarkable," HFY began, his voice steady and clear. The breakthrough wasn't just a scientific achievement, it was a complete reimagining of communication itself. Their research had proven that humans possessed a unique ability to create emotional bridges across species boundaries. Yuna demonstrated first. She projected a memory, complex, multi-layered, filled with emotional nuances that would typically be incomprehensible. Most species would experience mental confusion or complete rejection. But the holographic display showed something extraordinary. HFY's neural pathways didn't resist. Instead, they adapted, transformed, and translated the alien emotional landscape into something comprehensible. The Varaxian delegation, known for their rigid mental structures, leaned forward in disbelief. Their lead scientist, a crystalline, being with multiple sensory organs, looked stunned. "Impossible," he muttered, examining the data streams, but the evidence was clear. Humans could do what no other known species could: create dynamic, fluid mental connections that preserved emotional integrity while enabling cross-species understanding. Dr. Park Min-seo, their lead researcher, explained the technical details. "It's not translation, it's transformation. Humans don't just receive information, they regenerate it." The implications were massive. Diplomatic misunderstandings that had lasted centuries could potentially be resolved. Complex negotiations could happen at an emotional level, beyond linguistic. Limitations. HFY shared another demonstration. He projected his own memory, a childhood experience of loss, of understanding, of resilience. The emotional landscape was so rich, so nuanced, that several alien representatives visibly reacted. The Xylarian representative, a gaseous entity that typically communicated through electromagnetic pulses, seemed overwhelmed. "We're witnessing something unprecedented," he transmitted. Yuna explained their methodology. It wasn't about technology or advanced equipment. It was about human capacity for empathy, for understanding, for emotional flexibility. "Humans don't just communicate," she said. "They connect." The conference hall became increasingly charged. Representatives from multiple star systems began discussing potential applications. Diplomatic missions, conflict resolution, cultural exchanges. The possibilities seemed endless. The quantum communication network representatives were particularly excited. Their complex systems had always struggled with emotional nuance. Humans offered a completely new approach. HFY remained humble. "We're just beginning to understand our own potential," he said. But everyone in the hall understood something significant was happening. Humans were no longer just another species. They were becoming bridges, translators of the most complex language in the universe: emotional understanding. The Varaxian scientist approached them after the presentation. His crystalline form shifted with complex emotional signatures. "How?" he asked simply. HFY smiled. "We listen, not just with ears, but with our entire being." The breakthrough wasn't just scientific, it was philosophical, emotional, transformative. News. Agencies across multiple planetary systems began broadcasting the discovery. Images of HFY and Yuna spread rapidly. Two beings from different worlds, demonstrating a connection that transcended traditional understanding. Dr. Park looked at her team, her eyes filled with a mixture of pride and wonder. They had done more than complete a research project. They had opened a door to a new way of experiencing consciousness. As the conference concluded, multiple diplomatic requests flooded in. Research institutions, government agencies, and cultural exchange programs all wanted to understand this new form of communication. HFY and Yuna exchanged a subtle glance. They knew this was just the beginning. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology or its weapons. It was its capacity to understand, to connect, to transform. The universe was about to change, and it would start with something as simple and as complex as understanding. The Galactic Council chambers were unlike anything humans had seen before. Floating platforms suspended in a massive crystalline space, representatives from hundreds of civilizations gathered to witness something unprecedented. Hui stood alone, representing humanity. His simple black uniform seemed almost plain compared to the elaborate attire of alien delegates. But something about his presence commanded attention. 17 different alien civilizations had requested this special hearing. Their advanced communication technologies had always assumed superiority. Humans were considered a young, primitive species, until now. The quantum ambassador, a being composed of shifting light patterns, spoke first. "Explain your method of emotional translation." Hui didn't use complex technical language. He simply shared a memory, his grandmother's last moments, a complex tapestry of love, loss, and profound human resilience. The entire chamber fell silent. Alien representatives experienced the memory simultaneously, not as words, but as a living, breathing emotional landscape. Some wept crystalline tears, others vibrated with intense resonance. The Xylarian delegate, a gaseous entity that previously struggled with emotional communication, suddenly understood something fundamental about human experience. Their communication networks began recalibrating in real time. Humans are not just communicators, the quantum ambassador announced. They are emotional architects. Diplomatic protocols began changing instantly. Where previous interactions relied on complex translation algorithms and rigid communication structures, humans offered something revolutionary: pure emotional understanding. Una stood in the background, monitoring the proceedings. She had become more than a researcher. She was a bridge between worlds, between understanding. The Varaxian scientific delegation presented their findings. Hui's neural patterns showed capabilities beyond any known biological communication system. His mind didn't just receive information, it transformed it, creating new pathways of understanding. "We've discovered a species that doesn't just communicate," one Varaxian researcher stated, "but reimagines communication itself." Humanity's reputation transformed overnight. No longer seen as a young, aggressive species, they became potential mediators, healers of interstellar conflicts. Multiple star systems began requesting human diplomats. Cultural exchange programs expanded. Research institutions wanted to understand the human capacity for emotional intelligence. Hui remained humble. He understood this wasn't about individual achievement, but about humanity's collective potential. The Galactic Council proposed a revolutionary framework. Humans would become official emotional translation specialists, diplomatic representatives capable of bridging complex interspecies misunderstandings. Dr. Park Min-seo, watching from Earth, realized they had changed everything. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't technological superiority, but its capacity for profound emotional connection. The hearing continued for hours. Each alien civilization presented complex scenarios: historical conflicts, cultural misunderstandings, communication breakdowns. And each time, Hui demonstrated humanity's unique ability to find common ground. The Xylarian ambassador made a surprising announcement. "Humans are no longer considered a developing species. You are communication masters." Diplomatic requests flooded in. Conflict resolution teams wanted human representatives. Research institutions sought to understand their neural capabilities. Cultural exchange programs expanded exponentially. Una watched Hui with a mixture of professional respect and personal admiration. They had started as researcher and subject. Now they were something more, partners in a cosmic understanding. The quantum ambassador made a final declaration that would be recorded in galactic historical archives. Humans do not just communicate, they connect. As the hearing concluded, something fundamental had changed. The universe would never be the same. Humanity had proven that emotional intelligence was the most advanced form of technology. Hui looked at the vast chamber, at representatives from hundreds of civilizations. He realized they were witnessing a moment of transformation, not just for humanity, but for understanding itself. The future had arrived, and it spoke a language beyond words, the language of pure, unfiltered, emotional connection. 10 years had passed since the Galactic Council hearing. The universe looked different now. Humans were no longer seen as a young, aggressive species, but as bridges between civilizations. Jie stood on the observation deck of the interstellar diplomatic station, watching multiple alien ships dock simultaneously. Each vessel represented a different civilization, united by a new approach to communication. Yuna approached him, her alien form now familiar to everyone on the station. Their partnership had become legendary, a symbol of what was possible when different species truly understood each other. "Another conflict resolution mission," she said, her voice carrying a hint of excitement. 2 planetary systems had been on the brink of a devastating war. Previous diplomatic attempts had failed, but human emotional translators had been requested, and humans always found a way to connect. The mission briefing was complex: ancient territorial disputes, generations of misunderstanding, deep-rooted cultural differences, problems that traditional diplomacy could never solve. Jie understood something fundamental. Conflicts weren't about resources or territory. They were about unheard emotions, unprocessed pain, unresolved historical traumas. As their diplomatic shuttle approached the conflict zone, multiple alien species watched carefully. Humans had become the most requested mediators in the known galaxy. The first meeting was tense. Representatives from both planetary systems sat on opposite sides of a massive circular platform. Years of hatred and mistrust hung in the air like a thick fog. Jie didn't start with political discussions. Instead, he began sharing emotional landscapes, memories of loss, of hope, of collective healing. Each representative experienced these memories simultaneously. Something extraordinary happened. The emotional translation revealed a shocking truth. Both civilizations had suffered similar historical traumas. Their conflicts were more about unprocessed pain than actual differences. Yuna monitored the neural connections. The room's emotional temperature began to change. Anger transformed into understanding. Hatred slowly dissolved into shared grief. "We are not so different," one planetary leader said, tears streaming down his unusual facial features. By the end of the 3-day conference, a comprehensive peace treaty was signed, not through complex legal language, but through profound emotional understanding. Dr. Park Min-seo, now leading the Global Emotional Intelligence Research Center, watched the proceedings with pride. Humanity had discovered its true purpose, not as conquerors, but as connectors. The diplomatic station became a symbol of hope. Hundreds of species learned to communicate beyond traditional linguistic barriers. Humans had become the universe's emotional translators. Jie reflected on their journey, from a small research project to a galactic communication revolution. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology, but its capacity to understand. Yuna understood something profound. Humans weren't just solving conflicts. They were healing collective trauma, one emotional connection at a time. News networks across multiple star systems broadcast the successful mission. Humans were no longer seen as a young species, but as advanced emotional architects. The Galactic Communication Network began redesigning its entire framework. Human emotional translation methods were now standard practice. Universities across different planets started teaching human empathy protocols. As their shuttle returned to the diplomatic station, Jie and Yuna knew they had changed everything. Communication was no longer about words or technology, it was about genuine understanding. "We are just getting started," Jie said, looking at the vast cosmic landscape. Yuna smiled. The universe was learning a new language, a language of connection, of empathy, of profound emotional intelligence. Humanity had found its true calling, not as conquerors, not as technological masters, but as bridges between different worlds, different experiences, different ways of being. The stars seemed to shine a little brighter. A new era of understanding had begun, and it all started with 2 beings, a human and an alien, who dared to listen, to feel, to connect.